Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar channel of the Association of Certified eDiscovery Specialists. My name is Mike Guadarraro. I am the president of ACEDS. Today, we are joined by our friend and partner, Doug Austin from eDiscovery Today, for a webinar that I had the title on the screen is entitled Considerations for Leveraging Generative AI in Legal Writing. Sure to be a great topic. You can learn more about what Doug does at eDiscoverytoday.com. Please go there, read the blog, subscribe, like, and so forth. Before we get started, please know we love questions. We're happy to take questions. Please submit your questions using the Q&A button located on the bottom of your screen. You have the option to submit your question anonymously. Also, if you'd like a copy of today's slides, they should be available in the resource button also located on your screen. All right, enough from me. I'm super excited and pleased to introduce Doug Austin from eDiscovery Today, who will take the presentation from here. Doug, great to see you. Have a great presentation.
Thanks, Mike. Great to see you as well. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today. I am going to, just like Mike just did, I'm going to turn my video off because we'll focus on what's really on the screen there in terms of the slides. So I appreciate you all being here today. And here's what we'll be talking about. First, I'll set the stage by discussing and defining some terms and providing some general background regarding the use of generative AI today. Next, I'll discuss the current status of generative AI in the courts in terms of misuse of the tools in court and what courts are doing about that misuse of the tools to try to keep it from happening again. Then we'll spend considerable time evaluating the options for AI research and writing with a specific focus on options for ChatGPT today and in the near future, including the just announced ChatGPT 4.0. Then we'll discuss several factors to consider when using generative AI to create content, including the pros and cons of doing so, and how to maximize the benefits and minimize the risks. Then I'll touch on the use of prompt engineering and personas to maximize the value of the responses you get from generative AI tools. As part of that, I'll actually conduct a demonstration using ChatGPT 4.0 and Microsoft Copilot. Hopefully 4.0 cooperates a little better than it did last night as it was hanging a bit, but we'll give it our best shot. And of course, I'll do my best to save some time for questions. As Mike mentioned, you can put them in the Q&A button. And I'll leave you with some tips for using generative AI in your own legal writing efforts. In addition to the fact that there are slides, the slides have numerous resources, so be sure to download them to check them out on your own. Of course, any ideas expressed by me here today are my own, not those of my organization, clients, or partners. That's the standard disclaimer I give anytime I speak on a webinar. However, for this webinar, I'm providing a second disclaimer, which is that this is a rapidly changing industry, and what I'm telling you today may change tomorrow. I've actually conducted this presentation or parts of it 3 times over the last 4 months, and each time I've had to make considerable changes to several of the slides to address changes in the trends, and we saw some of those changes as recently as last week. So keep in mind as we go through this discussion that many of these trends will change. It's inevitable. So a little bit about me. In addition to being the editor of eDiscovery Today, I'm also the founder and CEO of eDiscovery, an eDiscovery and forensics provider. I've also written a couple of books, as you see there. I speak at a lot of conferences and webinars, and I've been teaching eDiscovery courses at Cal Berkeley since 2000. Well, there's only one thing wrong with this bio, and that's pretty much everything. There is no company called eDiscovery, so I'm certainly not the CEO of that company. These books don't exist either, or if they do, I didn't write them. And I've never been to Berkeley, much less Cal Berkeley, but I hear it's lovely. These are all hallucinations provided by ChatGPT in January of last year when I first began using it and asked it, who is Doug Austin? The models have certainly come a long way since then, but this illustrates just how far out they can be. So this is the real me. I've been in the industry over 30 years, and I've been writing a daily blog for over 13 years, so I'm either committed or I ought to be. So why am I teaching this, and what are my qualifications? Well, essentially, I write a lot, and I publish multiple posts per day, as well as doing other writing for clients. So I've investigated how Gen AI tools can help me with my own writing. I've also been covering a lot of the AI trends, so I can report on those trends in my blog and discuss them here. So I can provide that perspective here in this webinar. I'm certainly not going to try to say that I'm the foremost expert in advanced ways of using generative AI tools. Essentially, I'm a person who uses them a lot and can tell you what I've learned doing so to generate my own content as well as my own research. So let's start by defining some terms, including a term that's often misunderstood, AI. So here's one definition of AI. AI refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines, enabling them to perform tasks that typically require human cognition. This encompasses abilities such as learning, reasoning, problem solving, perception, and language understanding. Through algorithms and computational models, AI systems can process vast amounts of data, adapt to new inputs, and execute tasks autonomously or augment human capabilities. That's a pretty intense definition. So let's try this one. AI is like a really smart robot in a computer. This robot can learn, think, and make decisions just like humans, but it does so by following instructions given by people. It's like having a super helper in your computer that can play games, answer questions, draw pictures, or help you with your homework. It learns from lots of information to get better at what it does, just like you learn more from reading books or practicing something new. So both of these definitions were generated by ChatGPT. As you can see there, the prompt for both requested a one paragraph summarized definition, but the second one also asked for one that an 8-year-old can understand. Both of these are engineered prompts where the second one uses what's known as an audience persona to customize the response. And so we'll take a look at both prompt engineering and personas in detail a little later on in this hour. So here are some other terms you need to know, except for large language model. I didn't find most of them here, but you can look them up on your own. In fact, you can even ask ChatGPT to define them. Speaking of ChatGPT, which of these categories does it fall into? If you said all of them, you would be correct. ChatGPT is obviously a GPT, it's in the name, and I think most of you know that it's generative AI as well. It's also a large language model that uses deep learning, natural language processing, and neural networks. It's important to know all these terms because you'll hear them discussed when related to ChatGPT and other large language and generative AI models. Of course, you're probably aware that these models don't always get the answer right. When they provide a response that's incorrect or doesn't doesn't make sense, that's known as a hallucination. So why do hallucinations happen? Because LLMs don't actually know anything. They simply predict the appropriate text to return in a response based on their training. When the training doesn't adequately cover a question being asked, the model will provide a response that it thinks it's correct and may lead the user to believe it's correct as well. So that's why it's important to verify the content that the model provides in its response so you don't get burned by hallucinations. So what do AI models need to work? They need data, lots and lots of data. This is the 2023 Internet Minute infographic created by eDiscovery Today and LTMG last year, and it reflects what happens in a given minute on the internet. As you can see, that includes everything from 241 million emails sent per minute to nearly 19 million text messages sent per minute, to social media activity, chats on Slack, Microsoft Teams, and meetings in Zoom like this webinar that we're in right now. Even visits to ChatGPT, which is a lot higher now than the number you see here from early last year. It's important to keep in mind that generative AI models like ChatGPT are training on data from sources like the ones you see here. In fact, even in the big data world we live in today, AI models are beginning to run out of data to train on. For example, you might think YouTube videos aren't a good training source for generative AI, but OpenAI has transcribed over 1 million hours of YouTube videos to train GPT-4 using a speech recognition tool called Whisper. AI companies are also considering training the models using synthetic data, which is data generated by AI models themselves. So the models may begin training themselves pretty soon, which is kind of a scary thought. So here's a timeline of recent generative AI related events. Most of them, as you can see, have happened in the last year or so, which illustrates just how many things are happening in the generative AI world. If we focus on the first half dozen events, you can see just how the GPT models have progressed in terms of the parameters used to train them, from 117 million parameters in GPT-1 all the way to 1.76 trillion parameters in GPT-4 a little over 5 years later. So what happened the day after GPT-4 was released last year? It passed the bar exam in the 90th percentile. Conversely, GPT 3.5 failed the bar exam in the 10th percentile, so that's just how much smarter GPT-4 is than GPT 3.5. A lot of other amazing things have happened since then. For example, Google has launched a couple of models, first Bard, then Gemini. Microsoft added ChatGPT to Bing searching about a year ago now, and released Copilot last November. OpenAI has continued to add capabilities to ChatGPT, including image and voice capabilities. This past March, Anthropic released its latest version of Claude, and just last week, OpenAI announced ChatGPT 4.0, and the next day, Google released several new AI features, including adding generative AI into Google search. Of course, a bunch of bad things have happened too. OpenAI suffered a data breach back in March of last year, which they addressed pretty quickly. Then we saw a libel case filed against them last June, followed by copyright infringement lawsuits, including the one filed by Sarah Silverman and other authors, as well as in December, the New York Times. The FTC opened an investigation into OpenAI. Then for 4 days in November, OpenAI seemed to lose its mind, first firing CEO Sam Altman, then rehiring him 4 days later after an employee uprising, which also led to their board of directors being revamped as part of the dispute. Then in February, ChatGPT went off the rails for several hours one day, generating nonsensical responses. OpenAI never did explain what happened there. And a couple of days later, Google Gemini, which was programmed to deliver more racially diverse images of people, extended that approach to images of Nazis, which are not racially diverse. So there's been a lot of notable events, good, bad, and ugly, related to generative AI over the past 18 months. If you're not learning about generative AI, and obviously you're on this webinar, so you're learning something about it and how it can be used and leveraged in your business and in your legal writing, you're behind most people who are learning about it. This is the results of a survey question from this year's State of the Industry report by eDiscovery Today, where we asked 444 respondents about their personal experience with LLMs and generative AI. And as you can see, nearly 2/3 of them were at least reading and researching about it. And about the same percentage had at least experimented with the free version of ChatGPT. These results are 6 months old, so I'm sure it'll be a lot higher when we ask the same question at the end of the year for next year's report. There's no reason not to research and experiment with the tools. It's easy to do so and important to understand what they can do, which is a lot and more all the time. So now let's discuss generative AI in the courts. And I'll start with these 5 case citations. What do they have in common? I'll give you a moment to look at them. All right, time's up. The answer is that they're all bogus case citations included in a filing in the case Mata v. Avianca, which happened over a year ago now. The attorney who submitted the filing with the bogus case citations had over 30 years of experience practicing law and decided to use ChatGPT for case law research. And it hallucinated the cases you see here. The lawyer didn't exercise any due diligence to check on the cases unless you count the fact that he went back and asked ChatGPT whether they were real cases, to which ChatGPT said, yes, they're real cases. And I don't think that was enough due diligence, in my opinion. So both the lawyer and a colleague were each fined $5,000 which is, certainly a sanction, but it's nothing to being compared to becoming the poster child for misuse of ChatGPT in legal and being mentioned anytime the risk of generative AI are discussed in a webinar like this. So unfortunately for this guy, he's never going to live this down. But he's not the only one who's misused ChatGPT in legal filings. Here are several other examples. The first three are other lawyers who have also submitted filings with bogus case citations created by generative AI models. The second one was committed by Michael Cohen, former President Trump's former fixer, who's been in the news a lot lately. The third one says the lawyer was suspended for a year, but it was actually 2 months to extend to a year if the lawyer failed to complete certain requirements. The next two examples involve pro se parties, who are certainly as likely, if not even more likely than lawyers, to misuse ChatGPT. That final example involves a lawyer in Florida who was actually suspended for a full year with requirements to be completed before he could be reinstated at the end of that year. So will we see more examples? I think I can almost guarantee we will. For starters, there's over 1.3 million lawyers in the US. And even if 99.9% adhere to their ethical obligations, 0.1% of lawyers in the US is still about 1,300 plus. And even if only 10 of those submit court filings, that's still about 130 plus lawyers that could submit a case filing with bogus case citations created by generative AI. So far, I've covered about 8 of them. So I would kind of expect more to do so, unfortunately. And by the way, this doesn't even include legal professionals who submitted articles to publications with bogus information or cited works from industry experts that those experts didn't create. That's happened several times over the past year or so, including one I know of in a very popular legal technology news site. So what happens when lawyers and others submit filings with bogus case citations? Courts react or maybe overreact. As a result, we started seeing judges issue standing orders and certification requirements as to the use of generative AI in submitting those filings. The first one that I know of was Texas District Judge Brantley Starr, who required those who submitted filings to certify either that they did not use generative AI or that they verified the results if they did use it. We saw similar standing orders in Illinois and Pennsylvania as well. However, the order in Pennsylvania dictated notification of the use of AI, not generative AI. So that could be interpreted to be using things like Grammarly and spell check. We started to see a lot of pushback on standing orders like that. And apparently Judge Michael Bailson in Pennsylvania took notice, as his standing order has since been removed, and that's why there's no link to it there. Even the Fifth Circuit is considering a certification rule for the use of generative AI, and to my knowledge, and I just looked again yesterday, hasn't decided whether to do so after a public comment period. That last link there, Duke Law Center, which is led by retired Judge Paul Grimm, has created a repository of court rules, orders, and guidelines regarding the use of AI, which currently stands at 58 and is available via the link on this slide. So you can check that out to see what courts have said what in terms of directing participants in their use of AI and generative AI. Other judges have taken a different approach, though. For example, Illinois District Judge Ian Johnston, whose famous case we'll talk about in a bit, reiterated that filers must comply with Rule 11B and Rule 26G of the FRCP, as well as other ethical rules. And he cited the excellent article from Maura Grossman, Judge Paul Grimm, and Daniel Brown, which discusses how the current rules are sufficient to hold people accountable for submitting correct filings. And here's another judge, Louisiana State Judge Scott Schlegel, who also said rely on the rules in an open letter titled A Call for Education Over Regulation, pointing out Rules 1.1, 1.6, and 3.3 of the ABA model rules, as well as Rule 11 of the FRCP. And he states his belief that our current rules are sufficiently robust to address the use of generative AI. But Judge Schlegel goes a step farther in noting that he drafted his letter using ChatGPT-4. And he argues that the use of generative AI isn't the issue, but that generative AI is a tool, just like any other tool, that requires legal expertise guiding it. And he likens the value of content generated by it to a first draft by a junior associate or law clerk. In other words, lawyers should check the work of any assistant, whether it's human or AI. So interesting perspective from Judge Slagle there. So now let's talk a little bit about evaluating the options for AI research and writing and some of the considerations for using these tools. Here are some of the current public large language models that are available today. Chances are you've at least heard of the first four providers there, as they've been in the news quite a bit with their generative AI offerings and the improved enhancements and capabilities they've been adding to their products. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, just last week, OpenAI announced their new version of ChatGPT 4.0, where the O stands for Omni. They also announced all users, free and paid, will be able to use ChatGPT 4.0. However, they haven't yet rolled it out to free users, but are expected to do so within the next few weeks. The next day, Google announced a slew of new AI capabilities, including generative AI responses within Google search. You see options for Anthropic and Meta as well, both of which have released new versions of their models within the past 2 months. The last two models you see there are enterprise models. You may not have heard of them, and honestly, neither had I until I started doing some research. And here's one of the resources I stumbled upon during my research to learn about new models like Cohere and Snowflake Arctic. This is part of a public LLM leaderboard on GitHub, computed using Vectara's Hughes hallucination evaluation model, which evaluates how often an LLM introduces hallucinations when summarizing a document, and this list is updated every few days. You can click on the link to see the full rankings and get that updated list. And there's a few surprises on the list. For example, at least early on, GPT 4.0 isn't at the top of the list. There are several models above it, including GPT-4 and GPT-4 Turbo. You'll also see Snowflake Arctic as the second item on the list, which is how I found out about that model, which was just released last month. And there are several other models you may not have heard of, as more and more models keep getting released. In addition to the ranking of GPT 4.0, you'll see that the Google Gemini models are also well down the list. So this is only one mechanism for ranking the models, but it's informative, at least in terms of helping you to keep up on which models are out there. So one of the things to consider these days is, given that OpenAI just released ChatGPT 4.0 and will make it available to all users, should you invest or continue to invest in a ChatGPT Plus plan at $20 a month to use it? And I would say the answer is depends on what your needs are. This screenshot from ChatGPT shows what's currently available with the Plus and Team plans that's not available with the free plan. For example, the Plus plan gives you early access to new features that you may not see on the free plan for a while. That's illustrated by the fact that the Plus plan can already use GPT 4.0, while the free plan doesn't have access to it yet. The Plus plan also gives you reportedly 5 times as many prompts that you can submit to the model within a given period of time. And it gives you other features, such as the ability to generate images using DALL-E, the ability to create and use custom GPTs, and more. If you expect to be an occasional user and can wait for new features, the free plan may be all you need. If not, you may want to consider investing in at least the Plus plan, which is currently $20 a month. Certainly, the parameters will be changing over time, so this may be something you'll need to reevaluate from time to time. Speaking of DALL-E, here are several examples of images I've generated this year using it with my ChatGPT Plus account for use as images in eDiscovery today. As you can see, I've adopted a robot theme to many of my images. It took about 30 seconds or so, I think, to generate each of these images, and that was with GPT-4. And so far, I'm finding it's even quicker with GPT 4.0. By the way, why is the robot lawyer examining an alligator in the upper right image? Obviously, that's the investigator. Sorry, bad joke. But anyway, As I've already noted, announced features aren't necessarily available right away. For example, the free version of ChatGPT doesn't yet have access to GPT-4, much less GPT-4o. And even the Plus users don't have access to everything that was announced last week just yet. I tried to have it analyze a couple of times over the past week an audio interview that I did, and GPT-4o told me it couldn't do it. Then I asked whether GPT-4o has the ability to summarize audio files, to which it responded, yes, it does, and proceeded to try to do that, only to tell me that it can't, and it needs me to create a transcription first. So it appears we'll be seeing some of the new features rolling out over the next few weeks, even for paid users. But some announced features are available now, such as image identification. So here's a picture of my admittedly cluttered kitchen counter. As you can see on the right, I asked GPT-4o to tell me what was in the picture I took, and it was remarkably accurate in identifying the items it saw. So as you can imagine, there's all sorts of uses of this feature that could be ranging from identifying an item that you don't know what it is, to taking a picture of the items in your fridge and asking GPT-4o to suggest a recipe for those items. And certainly it's also going to be important from a standpoint of things like eDiscovery, where you have photos in evidence, and you've got to determine what's in those photos. The AI models can certainly help with that. So that's pretty cool. One thing that you want to be prepared for when using models like GPT-4 is that the stated knowledge cutoff for the models may not be necessarily as accurate as they claim. So, for example, the stated cutoff for GPT-4 is December 2023, while the stated cutoff for GPT-4o is October 2023. So surely the cutoff for the new model isn't earlier than the old model, right? Well, let's find out. So one of the things you can do to test the cutoff is to play the "Are They Still Alive" game, where you can look up what celebrities passed away in a given month and see if the model knows that they're dead. It's a bit morbid, but it's effective. So if you ask GPT-4 about Paul O'Grady, the British comedian, it knows that he passed away in March 2023. And it thinks that Jerry Springer, the talk show host, is still alive. However, Jerry Springer passed away in April 2023, sadly, yet GPT-4 didn't know that. So at least with that information, GPT-4 is up to date as it claims. So when we look at GPT-4o, it knows, as we can see, that Jerry Springer passed away in April 23, as it should. But it also knows that Rosalind Carter passed away in November 2023, which is beyond its stated knowledge cutoff date. So how did it know that? Well, as you can see, a GPT-4o conducted a web search to get the answer. So it seems as though GPT-4o may be more seamless in knowing when to go to the web to answer questions that could extend beyond its cutoff date. Of course, there's more than one way to use ChatGPT. You can use it within the GPT platform, as you see here, where I asked it a question that it once again needed to conduct a web search to get an accurate answer. It's important to note that the answer is only as accurate as the resources it chooses. When I conducted this webinar back in January for a law school class, GPT-4 chose a site that only listed 6 of the 8 states having passed data privacy laws in 2023. Now it's choosing different sites to get the correct answer of 8 states. So asking the same question at different times may get you different answers. One way you can get access to GPT-4 for free today is through Microsoft Bing, where you can use its Copilot to ask a question. One of the good aspects of asking questions in Bing is that you'll almost certainly get links to websites from where the information was supposedly retrieved. However, you'll want to check those resources, as what Bing responds with may not necessarily match the source site. It's also important to note that Bing's use of ChatGPT may give a different answer than the ChatGPT platform does. Here, it actually begins its answer with the 5 states for which data privacy laws went into effect in 2023, not when they were passed. Only at the end does it provide the correct answer of the 8 states who passed laws last year. This is also different from how it answered a few months ago when it gave the direct correct answer. So don't assume both implementations of the model will give you the same results, and don't assume the answer will stay the same over time. By the way, I also tried to illustrate the AI overview being applied to this question within Google search, but that feature is still rolling out, and it doesn't always appear with every search you do yet. So one thing you want to consider when using generative AI models is how will they use your data? You want to be sure you understand where they're keeping your activity history and whether they're using your data, which could include important or sensitive data, in training the model. For ChatGPT, the updates last week separated those two functions. So now ChatGPT has one setting to toggle whether you want to use your content to improve the model for everyone. And it has a separate new feature called temporary chat, where you can tell it if you don't want it to keep a particular chat in history, which means it won't be used for training either. So if you're inclined to use the model for anything sensitive, you should certainly consider using temporary chat, turning temporary chat on. In fact, better yet, you may not want to use the model at all for anything sensitive. As we saw in the previous slide, the settings dialog also enables you to export your activity. So once you confirm export, ChatGPT will email you a zip file that you can download. The contents of that zip file are represented in the example that you see in the upper right, an HTML file followed by a few JSON files. The HTML file will provide a list of your prompts and ChatGPT responses, like you see in the bottom right screenshot there, but with no other metadata that indicates when the activity occurred. So presumably that's located within the JSON files. It's important to understand how to export your activity because just like any other ESI these days, your ChatGPT or other generative AI model activity could someday be discoverable in litigation. Microsoft Copilot applies to generative AI capabilities in a variety of ways, including streamlining the creation of work product in Office apps like Word or PowerPoint. So depending on your license of Microsoft 365, you may or may not already have access to Copilot. If you don't, but you're a Microsoft 365 user, you can use Copilot Pro for $20 a month, which is what I'm doing. Here's an example of how Copilot can be used in PowerPoint to quickly set up the framework of a presentation where you can provide some instructions and the style of the PowerPoint presentation. And then Copilot will generate an initial draft presentation with some slides to get started. It looks pretty good, right? Using Copilot can be a terrific idea generator and a starting point for new content projects. And if you have Copilot, you'll see the Copilot icon, as you see in that upper left window, when you're in Word. When you click on it, you get that dialog in the lower left. And here's an example of an outline I generated using Copilot with a simple command that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. Copilot then generated everything you see on the right-hand side, which is a great start for an article about generative AI in corporate legal departments. And I'll demonstrate an example of that shortly. So there's no guaranteed way to identify if content has been written by ChatGPT or another generative AI model, but there are signs that can indicate that it has been. And so here are some of the signs that indicate that content was created using a generative AI model. Full disclosure, this list was created before ChatGPT 4.0 was released last week, so some of these indicators may change. For example, I've noticed that GPT 4.0 tends to be a bit less wordy than GPT-4. Regardless, I recommend taking the response from any generative AI model and customizing it to your own words to make it more authentic, and avoid some of the either unnecessary text or over-the-top words or what have you that are a typical sign of a generative AI model. And here are some pros and cons of using generative AI tools in your writing as I see them. Generative AI is terrific for generating ideas and identifying creative ways to supplement your writing. One of the things I find it useful for is identifying benefits or challenge related to a topic that I might have otherwise missed. But even though it seems as though hallucinations are becoming less frequent, you do still need to verify the content it provides is accurate, especially since it's not always consistent with its responses to the same prompts. And given the number of copyright cases against Gen AI providers out there currently, you should also be mindful of potential plagiarism and copyright concerns. The biggest con, as I see it, is that a model that's trained by the input of other people will never, by definition, provide thought leadership that no one else is saying. So just to establish your own thought leadership, that still has to come from you and your own experiences. That's why, just like Judge Slagle said, generative AI models are terrific tools to assist in writing, but not a replacement for writing. And that's how I use it, for ideas that I can use and incorporate into my writing. Regardless how you use the tools, you'll need to learn best practices in using them. Submit a bad prompt to an AI model, and you'll probably get a bad response, which is at best not the answer you were looking for, or even worse, inaccurate. So here are two more terms that you need to know that I mentioned earlier. As you can see here, prompt engineering is the practice of crafting input prompts to optimize responses from LLMs like ChatGPT. If you apply best practices, the way you phrase your questions or statements can guide the AI to give you much more highly relevant and helpful output. Prompt engineering is often iterative. You submit a prompt, get an answer, and then often ask a question in a more targeted way to get a better answer. Using personas can also be an effective way to tailor the response, like you saw when I asked ChatGPT to explain AI to an 8th grader. You could ask a model the same question but from two different perspectives, such as defining mesothelioma from both the doctor's perspective and a plaintiff attorney's perspective. And here's an example of that. Note, I asked ChatGPT to define the term in a single paragraph, which is an example of prompt engineering, but the persona for each is different. And see how the answers differ based on each persona. Here's the response from a doctor's perspective, where the doctor uses terms like rare and aggressive form of cancer, and mesothelium, and pleura, and peritoneum, tunica vaginalis, cellular damage, long latency period, symptoms and diagnosis. Terms that a doctor would look at in terms of how they would define mesothelioma and how they would think about it. But from a plaintiff attorney standpoint, they're using terms like exposure to asbestos, hazardous material, unknowingly exposed, at work, contaminated products, severe pain, clear link between asbestos exposure and mesothelioma, seeking compensation for medical expenses, and negligence. That's how a plaintiff's attorney looks at mesothelioma. So the persona to which you apply a question or a prompt can significantly change how the response is provided by the AI model. And here are examples of different prompts you can use with ChatGPT. As you can see, you can have it suggest things like topic ideas or catchy headlines. You can have it prepare content outlines. You could have it draft emails, simplify content, reword things, or even write a call to action. Plus, users can also translate content from one language to another. They can create pictures with DALL-E and summarize files, and more. But instead of talking about examples, let's go over to ChatGPT and I'll show you some. So I'm going to toggle over to my screen here. All right, there's my ChatGPT instance, and I'm actually going to pull up some notes here. One of the things I decided I didn't want you all to suffer through is me typing out prompts to GPT. So I've pre-typed them and we'll copy them in from a TextPad file. But as you can see here, you can select the model that you are able to work with here. There's the temporary chat feature of ChatGPT 4.0. You also have your options here, including your settings that I showed you earlier, where you have general settings, you have data controls. So that's the ability to improve the model for everyone, export data, and so on and so forth. And you also have a help function here, which gives you the ability to things like FAQ and release notes and terms and policies and keyboard shortcuts and so forth. So let's try out a few prompts over here. So the first one I'm going to do is suggesting some topic ideas. And I'm going to pick something that I've written about a lot, which is suggest 10 topic ideas related to avoiding sanctions and litigation. All right, so I'll enter that in, and there it goes, starting to crank those out. So if you're looking for something to write about, it can be really good and helpful in providing suggestions like that. One of the things, of course, you can note here is you can have it read the answer aloud. You can copy, you can regenerate if you don't like the results. You can also give it feedback in terms of whether you thought it was a good response or a bad response, and you can change the model if you want to as well. So that gives you a sense very quickly of 10 topics it came up with regarding sanctions and litigation. So let's try, let's do another one. This time we'll do 10 catchy headlines for understanding the basics of electronic discovery. So we'll pop that in there and let that one go. Okay, and this time it just gives us the headlines, doesn't give us anything else, but again, it's cranking those out pretty quick. And one of the things I've seen or noticed so far, except for last night, is that 4.0 seems to be much quicker in providing responses than GPT-4 was. All right, so let's try something that is maybe from an audience persona standpoint, a complicated topic that needs to be maybe explained a little more simply, which is something that anybody in eDiscovery can understand who understands technology-assisted review, continuous active learning. So let's talk about what that is and explain it to a non-technical lawyer. All right, and it goes through it. It defines it. It discusses how it works, and it discusses the benefits. And again, very quickly generated there. You've got a lot of information there that you could use. One of the great things about these tools is you can use them to explain complicated topics more simply to those who are struggling grasping those topics. So one of the things that you saw earlier in one of the screenshots, I'll do here, which is content outline. So this time I'll do a content outline for an article about considerations for generative AI in corporate legal departments. I'll also do that again here in Copilot here in a moment. And it busts out an outline, as you can see, pretty quickly, with different sections and subsections, and would be a very useful start to putting together a very comprehensive article. 7 different main sections, including an intro, including a conclusion and a call to action. So very informative, very a good structure there to start with to write that article. One of the things that some people struggle with are, people putting together webinar descriptions. So let's have it do one of those. So I'm going to have it create a webinar description for understanding the benefits and challenges of generative AI within the practice of law. So let's see what it will put together there. All right, and it's actually providing a description we could really run with quite nicely. A high-level discussion, key topics covered, even placeholders for speaker names, who should attend, placeholders for webinar details, and so forth. So that's a lot of really useful information it's providing just simply to, simply based on that one prompt. So let's have it do something. We're going to take a couple of different examples here. We're going to take a pretty lengthy paragraph here. You can, in fact, you can see it's a very large paragraph here. And we're just going to ask it to reword the paragraph. We don't like the way it's worded, so we're going to try to reword it. So we'll have it go do that. And it goes and it generates a reworded paragraph. Still might be a little bit, you know, a little bit verbose for what we want to look at. So how about this time we have it simplify the content and make it easy to read for elementary school kids. So same, the same paragraph as before, but this time we've told it to simplify it. And now what it's done is it's broken it up nicely into bullet points and just tried to make it a lot simpler for people to understand. So that's nice to be able to take a concept, a complicated paragraph and simplify it. Now, let's take a look at its translation capabilities. Okay, this is actually a famous literary passage. I'll give you a minute. I know it's got all these spell check things popping up there because it doesn't understand that this is not English, but I'm going to translate it into English. If you know it, good for you. If not, you're about to find out. And of course, it was the passage from A Tale of Two Cities that opens up the Charles Dickens book. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and so forth. So, you know, that gives you a sense of some of the translation capabilities a tool like this has. Now let's have a little fun. I'm sure many of you have seen the movie Titanic. If you haven't, I'm about to give a spoiler. So if you do want to see it, it's a 30-year-old movie, so you should have seen it by now. But if you don't want to know what happens, I'm about to tell you. So as you probably, those of you who have seen it, you know Jack dies at the end of the movie. But one of the things he's doing toward the end is he and Rose are hanging off the piece of the ship. And he says he's going to write a strongly worded letter to the White Star Line about what happened. So let's say Jack lives. And now, of course, these days, it wouldn't be a letter. Maybe it might be an email. So let's have him write one. So we'll write an email. And it will go and crank that out, hopefully. Sometimes pauses for a moment. And cranks out a pretty good email that you could start with. Obviously, again, you would want to customize it to your own needs, but it gives you a sense of some things that you can do there. So that's certainly something notable. So one of the things, of course, you can do with GPT Plus is you can create pictures. So let's have it do one of those. So in this case, I'm going to have it create a picture with a robot lawyer addressing the jury. And I've given it dimensions that I like a certain kind of dimension format to my images. So we'll have it put them in those dimensions. All right, and you can see how quickly it will generate that image as I get a sip here. All right, and there's an image like that a robot lawyer addressing a futuristic courtroom, as you can see there. If I didn't want a futuristic courtroom, I could go back and adjust my instructions. I also can, obviously, which I've done often, I've had Dolly create an image. I'm like, well, it's not quite the image I like, or, you know, I don't like it as well as I would. Just have it regenerate, and it will go through and do it all over again. And maybe the next time it will be an image that I like better. And we'll give it a moment to do that. All right, so now it's given me two more images. that I can look at and decide which ones I like, and I can go from there. And then it also asks me which was the response better or worse, and I could either say better, worse, or the same if I want to give it feedback. So kind of a sense of what it can do from a image creation standpoint. Now, another thing it can do is it can summarize contents of files. And one of the kind of best examples of a gnarly file for it to summarize or provide information about is the DR distributors case from a little over 3 years ago, which is, as you can see, this is the PDF from eDiscovery Assistant, 84 pages here. It's actually over 200 pages in a traditional format like Westlaw. It's a very gnarly, very gnarly, long eDiscovery case law ruling from Judge Ian Johnston, who that I mentioned before. It's so long it has to have a table of contents to kind of set the stage, if you will. So let's see what ChatGPT can do with that. So I'm going to go here to the paperclip, and I'm going to actually load it in to the model. All right, and I'll go ahead and ask it to please summarize this case. This time I typed it because it was a short prompt here. Going to go through the document, and now it's going to summarize the ruling and give me quite a bit. Now, I like, again, the interesting thing here is the changes that the model applies from time to time. One of the things that it mentions here is the initiation of litigation in 2012 with some different judges, a partial summary judgment, and then so this is a different summary than every other time I've every other time I've run this. But it's interesting to give you a sense of some of the things that happen there, and it talks about the outcome. So let's talk about maybe a couple of things from the case that are a little more detailed. So one of the things I'll ask it is, please provide a direct quote from the court regarding defendant Brett Duke's experience with technology. Let's see what it has to say about that. All right, so it gives me a quote here. Depending on any given moment, Duke has portrayed himself to be a Luddite. So if we go over here and we do a search for the term Luddite, it looks like it's provided that quote pretty accurately, and continues on. It puts it all in one paragraph, but the quote appears to be correct. 4 months ago, when I did this webinar, you could ask it for a quote, and it would give you a perfectly logical sounding quote that would be absolutely bogus. It wouldn't be in the case law at all. Earlier today, when I tested it out, it actually gave me several quotes from different parts shoved together as if they were one quote. So that's where sometimes you get varied answers with the tools like this. I'll ask it one more thing, which is, there we go. Please, we'll get a list of the sanctions here. And then we'll describe in a little more in detail the sanctions there. Which basically included a jury instruction on discovery failures, payment of attorney's fees and costs, which turned out to be significant, I think, in 6 figures. And the last point is interesting: complete at least 8 hours of CLE and certify that they've read the entire order. And honestly, I'm not sure which is worse, because the order is so long, it probably takes close to 8 hours to read it. So that just is an indication of some quick things you can do there with ChatGPT. Now, very quickly, let's take a look at some Copilot things we can do. There's the Copilot icon there. So let me actually do a test there, creating a content outline here. So I will ask it to create a content outline for an article about considerations for generative AI in corporate legal departments, and hit generate. And it starts cranking it out. Now, obviously, we saw that it cranked one out in ChatGPT as well, but of course here it's already in Word, and then we can start working with it. So it kind of, one of the things that I find interesting sometimes is to ask the same question into different models and see how the options vary, and then kind of decide, which pieces of each I like the best. And so sometimes it's a cobbling together of the results from different models that I've tended to do to really, give a sense of what can be done there. But right now here, I've got a good outline that I could start with. That could be an article. This one's a little bit more summarized than the outline that ChatGPT gave me, but still useful. Let's do something in PowerPoint here. So here I'm going to create a presentation. And so I will go ahead and have it plug in one and create a presentation with the title, and see what it gives me. And we'll give that a minute. And while that's happening, I do see I've got a question here. Would your ability to craft prompts transfer to the use of AI applications within Relativity or other eDiscovery tools? Absolutely. The question will be as to the extent of their implementation of the AI models. But certainly one of the things that I think will be a big key from an eDiscovery standpoint in the using of these tools is the aspect that prompt engineering is going to be how you'll be able to effectively use these tools better. So understanding those best practices will be important, so that you can, kind of get more out of the generative AI applications within eDiscovery tools. I kind of look at prompt engineering kind of like the keyword searching that we've been used to over the years. The keyword searching seems easy, but it's very easy to do it very badly. And the same is true with AI prompting. It's best to have some prompt engineering best practices to get the most out of the tool. So great question. And you can see our PowerPoint right here. It's generated some pretty good looking slides here. A nice little title slide, overview, some, different perspectives, what is, defining it, why use it, some different use cases and real world applications. Interesting that I would have maybe put this one above these two. Even some case studies. Interesting. That's the first time I've seen it do that. So just gives you some different potential, items there that could be a good starting point for putting together a presentation, and you can take it from there. You can also, what I could also do here is I could actually save this. I could have an outline that I've created and use that to create a presentation. So if I if I've kind of customized my own outline the way I want it, I could use that. Then I could say, create a presentation from this outline located here, and it will do that, and so forth. So hopefully giving you some idea of kind of how these tools work and the power of them, but also some of the variability in terms of how they work as well. Let's see. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the aesthetics of PowerPoints, it creates some very nice looking PowerPoints to start with, and of course you can adjust the presentation of it quite a bit. So if we have any other questions, I think, yeah, okay, so I answered that one. Let's end with some tips. So one of the things, again, as the outset I said, is that I do a lot of writing, and certainly I've covered a lot of the trends out there. So some tips that I would provide: certainly vet your sources, cite the ones you use. The tools are getting better about enabling you to point to sources where the information was obtained. So certainly take advantage of that. Remember the rules, the ABA model rules and FRCP and so forth. If you're doing any legal writing, especially filings within the courts, the rules require you to be ethical and provide and be due diligent in the filings you make. And also, you want to be aware of what the courts are requiring, which that resource, the Duke resource that I pointed to, provides a great ability to do. Take an iterative approach to using the tools. It doesn't always give you the best answer the first time out. So you may ask it a question, get the answer, find that you need to kind of ask it a different way to get closer to the answer that you're seeking. If you use the tools, disclose it. There's no shame in using these tools to assist in your writing. When I've used them as content in eDiscovery today, I've acknowledged that. There's no shame in using it. They're a great resource to use, but again, you want to be disciplined about it. And then, most importantly, keep up with the latest trends. I would certainly recommend reading about this. Set 5 to 15 minutes aside daily and just kind of read about the trends out there, because a lot is happening and things are moving quick. And then, of course, try to, as I always tell people, 5 to 15 minutes a day of reading and attend one free webinar a month, which is what you've done here, are the types of things that will hopefully keep you, informed as to what's going on there. A couple other chat messages. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks to the two of you. And I will pop my video back up there and say hi to Mike, who will take us out.
All right, Doug, thanks so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on the ACEDS webinar channel today. Thank you, Doug Austin. Thank you, eDiscovery Today, our partner and friend. A great presentation, something for everyone here. Encourage everyone to use this latest technology. It is a tool, but of course, the warnings Doug gave are of paramount importance. Please, everyone, visit aceds.org for a complete list of upcoming webinars. Have a great day, and as always, be kind to one another.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.